Welcome to Pueblo Chieftain Prep Rally 2017. I'm Jeff Latofsky along with Jeff Bursch of the Pueblo Chieftain Sports Department. And we're here to talk about a little bit about review some of the prep season and then preview what's ahead. We're about halfway through the football, volleyball, softball. Well, softball's about ready to wrap up, but we have wrapped up the golf season. We had eight players from Pueblo at the state tournament, and 2 Pueblo County players were the top finishers from Pueblo. Was Brock Rodriguez, he finished 28th, and Andrew Egan finished 36th. So we had a pretty good showing by the Pueblo kids. We only had 8 there, and we didn't have a team for one of the few times that they've had over the years. So well, moving on to football, and that's a big sport in this town, but we only have 2 teams above 500 out of the 8 teams that we cover. It's been a real difficult challenge for a lot of the teams who have new coaches, Central, Centennial, Rye, Dolores Huerta. So it's been sort of a rebuilding year for those teams, but we do have Pueblo West and Pueblo South, 2 teams that are really in the mix in the 4A ranks, Jeff.
Yeah, definitely. Pueblo West at this point is 5-0. Having one of the better years. They're ranked 6th in the state, 6th in the RPI this week. South's been pretty impressive outside of the loss to Pueblo West, which was a 1-point double overtime loss. Yeah, definitely a close game, a tough loss for South. They had gave up a couple kick returns, an interception return, things like that may have cost them. But, at the same time, Pueblo West did what it had to do to win that day, and they're kind of reaping the benefits of it right now, the higher RPI and things like that. Pueblo West is getting ready to start conference play, definitely a tough conference they're in with Pine Creek, which is number 1 in the RPI still, despite losing last week to Ralston Valley. Excuse me. So, they're definitely those 2 teams definitely in the mix for the playoffs. South right now is at number 16 in the RPI, so still in the mix. They're going to need to put together some big wins here down the stretch to make sure they keep that spot for the playoffs. Big game with Ponderosa at some point, which moved up to the number 1 ranking this week, but not in the RPI. Yeah. So a lot of interesting things with those 2 teams. Another big thing is East. They lost last week in the Cannon game, dropped to 0-5. A rough start for them, especially coming off the 3 state titles. That they're still in the mix, though. If they go out and win their conference, they will make the playoffs. And I'm looking through their schedule, it's doable. Haven't lost a conference game since 2013. They open this week against Durango in Pueblo at the Thunder Bowl, so should be an exciting game. Those 2 teams, at least to start the year, were probably the 2 favorites in that league. So getting that win could, kickstart East into a good run toward the end of the season. Give it back to Jeff here. I think he was going to talk a little bit about softball.
Yeah, and really we want to talk about a little bit about RPI, which is the ratings percentage index. It's hard for me to say, but that's what's crucial as far as this, the playoffs are concerned in every sport, and each sport has that RPI that measures the strength of your schedule, who you play, who you don't play, and really the strength of your league, and really that's the key to everything. And East right now, is way high in the RPI. So their only chance of making a playoffs is winning their league, because league champions are protected, even though they're not guaranteed a home berth.
Right.
But if East does get in, they'll be likely a 16 seed. So they would have to play the number one seed in RPI during that time. But the RPI just came out last week, so it's in its 2nd week. So we're keeping a real good eye on the RPI, and really it comes into play in softball. There's a good example in the South Central League. Last year we had all 6 teams in the South Central League that went to the playoffs because of the RPI. And one of the reasons is the South Central League is such a difficult league, and it's such a competitive league. And the coaches are smart enough to their non-league schedule, they play against good teams, right. so that also increases your RPI. But at this point, Pueblo West is about ready to wrap up the South Central League. They do play tonight against Centennial, and they have Central tomorrow. If they would happen to trip up against Centennial, then the Central game really would be for the league title, and then there's a possibility they could tie in the league title. And then we don't want to look at all the tiebreakers that they have going in the South Central League.
You were saying earlier that all 6 teams potentially could be in the postseason.
Right, and even at this point, Centennial is 4-13, I believe, and they're the 32 seed in the RPI, which would get them in the mix as far as the regionals are concerned, because there's 8 different regionals, four teams in each regional. Multiply 8 times 4, there's 32. And it's real interesting. I was looking at the RPI today, and George Washington is 31st, and their record is 12-4. So, that's the importance of the RPI. Even though you have a bad record, but you play in a good league and you play a great non-league schedule, then you're going to be able to get in the playoffs. And you never know what can happen in the playoffs. You can get hot all of a sudden, and that's why the RPI is so important. And really, they adjust it to each sport. The difference, and there's a little quotient in there that they can adjust. And I think that's the strength of the RPI. A couple years ago, we had some real strange. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a playoff format type thing that.
Yeah, they've tried some different things.
Yeah, and it sometimes doesn't work, and CHSAA recognized that, and this RPI has been fairly successful so far. So, I don't know what your opinion is of it, but I think it's been a good thing for CHSAA.
Yeah, the big thing coming out of football last year was Loveland being left out at 9-1, and that's potentially what South could be looking at, a great record. If they were to lose to Ponderosa, maybe falling out of that top 16 and being left out. So it's really important for South and the RPI to just keep winning and maybe have some of their teams that they've beaten win too. So yeah, that definitely is a big deal.
So we're wrapping up at least a couple of seasons. Softball is going to be entering regionals the next weekend, and then the state will follow that. But we do have tennis regionals this weekend on the boys' side. And Craig Sesker is our tennis guru here at the Chieftain, so he'll be covering the regionals, and then of course the state tournament, is going to be here in Pueblo, and that's always an exciting time. Unfortunately, the Pueblo schools are stuck in the classification with teams like Cheyenne Mountain and some of the teams up north that are real difficult to play against, some of the private schools. So for a lot of the Pueblo kids, the regionals is almost like their state tournament. So, if you can get past this point and get into the state tournament, it's almost like you've won a state title in a lot of respects, because you're going up against real difficult competition. So, from that standpoint, we're halfway through the football season, and we're moving on, and it's been a great year so far, and we're excited to bring it to you, and we look forward to the next half of the season.